It's late 1914, and the combination of lethal firepower and barbed wire has led to both sides literally digging in.
So we're in these trenches, and every time I try and get out of one, every time I pop my head up there, it gets shut off.
And the trenches got more and more sophisticated, so now we're in it, there's all these... They've got quite comfortable, they're digging deep bunkers, some of them have got electricity in them and carpets on the floor and stuff. I mean, these are basically cities, these trenches on the front line.
They don't want to live in these things. Presumably they want to get out. How do you get out? Every time you go over there, you get killed.
Well, that's true, and basically for 3 long years, the Brits and their allies try little things, they try new things, they try ways of getting across no man's land, and they don't work.
I mean, it looks like it's from outer space.
It does look, it's like science fiction. The way it floats across the ground, it's eerie, isn't it?
It's weirdly intimidating, that, isn't it? But what about the guns? You've got, what, 2 guns on either side?
Big 6-pound guns there, and also machine guns all round. There are also little holes that you could... There were little holes, if enemy jumped on the tank, you could open little holes and stick your pistol out and stuff as well. One of the legendary barriers on no man's land was obviously barbed wire.
Yeah.
It sort of came to haunt the nightmares of British infantrymen. I'll show you what the tank does to a bit of barbed wire. That's what happened. Sometimes it would actually drag it off, it would rip it to bits, you'd often clear it completely. So the foot soldiers now, the infantry, can be walking along behind it, there were big columns of them behind it, and just following it, the path that it crushed and made in the barbed wire. Can you imagine the sense of excitement, having spent years being machine gunned out in the open, and now having something like this protecting you?
It's incredible. And is this it at full speed, do you reckon?
Well, that is the alarming truth, yeah. It can do about 4 miles an hour, yeah. And that, you spotted the problem there. Another problem is it was rushed into production so fast, they used what they had, they used an old tractor engine, so there were lots of problems with breakdowns. Well, it wasn't all of the answer.
No.
But it was a long way down the road.
I'll tell you, it's one of the most impressive things I've seen on...
Broke down this slow and all that kind of stuff.
So what is it, then, if it's not the tank that breaks the deadlock?
Well, I mean, tanks are really good. Tanks in combination with lots of other things, and one of the most important of them, aircraft. If there is one piece of machinery that gets completely revolutionised by World War I, it's aircraft. At the start, there's little scout planes held together by bits of string, and they were so primitive that if you wanted to kind of get an enemy out of the sky, they sometimes used grappling hooks. They threw out anchors to drag you down.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. But basically, the speed of aircraft pretty much doubled in World War I. And the height at which they could fly pretty much tripled.
Could you drop bombs and things from these planes?
Initially, in 1914, you just carry a bomb in the plane and just drop it over the side. Yeah, totally. By the end of the war, it's far more scientific, and they're conducting air raids deep behind enemy lines.
So, if you've got planes, you don't have to worry about no man's land. You can just drop bombs, win the war, yeah?
Well, not quite. It's not that simple. They do need what I think is probably the most important last element of winning the war on the Western Front, and that is guns.
They already had lots of guns, though, didn't they?
They needed more. Check this out. In weight, and they're about 20 centimetres in diameter. They're actually massive. This one here is packed from there to there with high explosives. First thing you've got to do is, before the war, Britain doesn't have many guns, doesn't have many factories producing guns or shells, so you've got to build all of those. You've got to perfect them, get the design right, and then you've got to fire vast quantity towards the enemy. Oh, a whole line of exploding shells and poisonous gas and all that kind of stuff. Reconnaissance aircraft help to coordinate all the elements and provide vital information on the enemy. It's all married together, so that's how complicated it is.
If we're a soldier, then right in front of us, there is just masses of rainfall of bullets and explosions.
Yeah.
Presumably, loads of us die.
Yes, the Australians believe if you're not taking casualties from your own artillery bombardment, you weren't close enough to it.
He's so horribly dangerous, isn't he?
It was incredibly dangerous and incredibly complicated, but it's less dangerous than walking by yourself with a rifle across no man's land towards enemy machine guns. And that is how they break the stalemate of the First World War. And who can blame them? Tanks were like nothing else seen before, but looking back now at those early years of the tank, it's astonishing how rapidly it evolved. On the 30th of June 1915, right here on Wormwood Scrubs in West London, Winston Churchill and David Lloyd George first. Independently, the French had come up with their very own tank designs. But they were unreliable and frequently got stuck. The real game changer was this. The Mark IV. And then you enter the main body of the tank, quite tight for space. There would have been 8 people in here, 8 crew required, 4 of them just required to drive the thing. Right in the middle, dominating the whole space, is the engine. There we go. It's an old pre-war tractor engine. As you can see, there's no partition here between the engine compartment and the crew compartment, and that meant that people had huge problems. The crews often had to be hospitalised after a day or two in the tank. They'd become asphyxiated by the fumes coming off this engine. Also incredibly hot. They made 1,000 of these during World War I, and it went on to serve with great success in battles like Cambrai. The tank was becoming an integral part of the Allied strategy. As armoured warfare evolved, the number of different types of tank multiplied. This was a so-called whippet tank. It was designed to follow the heavy tanks into battle. Then when they'd made the penetration, these could spread out, speeding behind the German lines, sowing absolute chaos. The French had a similar idea, and only a few months earlier, in 1917, had launched the popular Renault FT-17. This was a light tank, and the first with a fully rotating turret. But it wasn't as quick as the Whippet. This could do 8 miles an hour, a dizzying speed, around double what other tanks could do at the time. The Germans were slow to pick up on the whole tank thing. Initially, their high command thought it was pretty unmanly driving around the battlefield in a steel container. Good old walking was good enough. Quite rapidly, though, they realised their mistake, and they produced this, the Sturmpanzerwagen. Meanwhile, the British design just kept evolving. After the Mark IV tank came, surprise, surprise, the Mark V. Now this was the vehicle that played its part in the titanic British victories of the summer and autumn of 1918. It spearheaded British attacks like the one at the Battle of Amiens on August the 8th, which saw British and Allied infantry advance further into German lines than any other battle on the Western Front in World War I. These Mark Vs were faster, more reliable than the Mark IVs. They were also able to be steered by one person, unlike the 4 people required to steer this tank's predecessor. Britain's massive industrial base and innovative culture was producing tanks which every year were becoming better and better by orders of magnitude. In less than 3 years, tanks had gone from the drawing board to becoming integral to Allied war plans. They were no longer just a novelty, but another part of the machinery of war, one that was critical to the final Allied victory.